Yeah, I'm just gonna. You don't have to broadcast this. I think we're gonna go ahead and get started. So, because we have a few introductory remarks, comments, etc. So, you guys in the back, you're all good. I know. I'm not doing.
You're out. You're going out. People are here.
Oh.
But they're not hearing you very well. So go ahead and hold it.
Oh, okay. All right. All right. So I want to welcome you to the final lecture in our 2015-2016 seminar series. So this is a very special lecture and a special series, 2015-2016, because it marked two anniversaries for our department. One is we are celebrating 75 years as a department. Woo-hoo, woo-hoo. Yeah, feel free to express yourself. 75 years as a department. We have some history that I know maybe the Herald Palladium here. I could get that information to you. It was part of our first inaugural um, celebration. And we are also celebrating 50 years of this class, which is the seminar class. This seminar class was started under the chairmanship of Dr. Dwayne Ford. And so if you look on the screen, my left, upper left, that's Dr. Dwayne Ford. And in celebration in honor of his guidance as the chair, as him getting the vision and foresight to get this seminar class and as well as guest lecture series started, we renamed our guest lecture series the Dwayne L. Ford seminar series. So that's a big deal. He was here, and we gave him, I think, due honor and recognition for his contribution. The rest of the pictures there are mostly, because there's one that we were not privileged to hear because of, was it last week? The snowstorm? Yeah. But I still put his picture up there. So first of all, I want to thank, and we should thank, all of our guest speakers that helped to make this guest lecture series, a very informative, very exciting, lots of different lectures here, wide-ranging fields. But I would say that all of them were really valuable and exciting. So I think we should give a round of applause. One of the things that I will do is, and I've already sent them the email copy, the electronic version of this, but this could be like a memento for them. And maybe Dr. Novak, we could build on that, send them the hard copy, framed or something. And you guys might want to keep this too, okay? For our double anniversary year as a chemistry department. So we want to move on next to looking at today's lecture. Lectures by Dr. Marc Edwards. And the reason I knew about him was because of the Flint water lead poisoning crisis. Is there anybody in this room that has not heard about the water crisis in Flint? Okay. And in the center of this is chemistry. So originally, Dr. Edwards was not on our schedule, but this had to be something we had to try to put together. Flint is just about, 3 hours away from us? Maybe less? So this is happening really, this is happening really very close to us. And it's something that has a lot of different implications. A our lecturer today has been famous for a while. Okay. So, for example, I'm not going to read his entire bio, but for example, back in 2004, he was called the plumbing professor by Time magazine and listed him among the four most important innovators in water from around the world. In 1996, he was given the Presidential Faculty Fellowship by the White House. He is a MacArthur Fellow. He has a MacArthur Fellowship, 2008 to 2012. That's just a few of the many things. And again, all of this information is stuff that I've sent out to you so you could read more about it. But those are some of the highlights in his very distinguished career. And a career that really emphasizes the intersection of chemistry with real life. I mean, people drinking and using water that's polluted is not cool. Okay, it's just not cool. And he has made very significant contributions, and you will see from his topic here, this is not the first go around on this in the United States. Okay, back in 2001, 2004, we had a problem like this in Washington, D.C. as well. So anyway, we are very privileged and honored to have you here, Dr. Professor Edwards, and we will welcome you and await your presentation.
Well, thank you so much for having me, and it's truly an honor to be able to be here today, virtually at least, at this double anniversary presentation. And your school's amazing. What you guys are doing is amazing, and I just wanted to share kind of a little bit about this journey I've been on for, I guess, sort of a lifetime, but more particularly the last 12 years. And I'm just a normal guy from a very small, poor town in New York State, and always loved science and I always loved helping people. And I've had a great career, and I can't encourage people enough, if you're interested in science and engineering, to follow your dreams, and try to make the world a better place, as I've done throughout my career. And what I want to do today was kind of talk a little bit about the Washington, D.C. lead crisis, because it is where my journey started on the last 12 years. And it does lay the background for why Flint became such a national and international sensation. And I also wanted to talk a little bit about something that's become very important to me, and that is your future and who you ultimately become in the workplace. And I want to ask you a question directly. What price are you going to be willing to pay to defend the public, if not when the time comes for you to do so? And I want to start this out by posing a kind of a philosophical sort of question here. And I want to give two examples that are kind of disturbing in some ways. One is a case that really profoundly disturbs me. This is a traffic camera that caught a picture of a young child in China who happened to walk out into the street. And this child got hit by a car. And actually, this was caught on traffic surveillance camera. And it caught humankind at their worst. Because what happened is this child got hit by a car and was left in the street. And over about a 7-minute time period, 18 people just drove by this young child, did not stop to help this child. And the child was left in harm's way and actually got run over a second time and ultimately died because, frankly, people were just bystanders. They didn't want to get involved to help this person, this young child, this innocent toddler. And I wanted to compare this incident, which, by the way, has nothing to do with China. I mean, we've got traffic surveillance cameras in the United States, and time again, it catches people doing nothing when someone innocent has been hurt, when they're left in harm's way. And this is true about people all over the world. You know, this is just something that happens. And I wanted to compare these examples where humans were caught at their worst with another example where an animal was caught doing something better. So I'm going to play this video and pay attention.
This is truly amazing. Here's a dog who's been hit by a car trying to cross the road. There he is trying to cross the road, and he gets hit and is now just lying in the middle of this busy highway, and a second dog spots him and tries to get over to him. Here's the first dog again being hit. He's lying there in the middle of the road, busy time of the highway, and here comes the second dog, who grabs him not with his teeth, but actually gets him with his paws around his neck and drags him in the middle of all this traffic off the road to safety, little by little, inch by inch. Finally, some workers spot the dogs and come over and help them. And by the way, the injured dog lived.
So, you know, I hope that's a pretty amazing story. When I see it, I kind of get tears in my eyes every time because, you know, what I wanted you to think about at the start of this lecture, you know, we've seen two accidents I described two species, two outcomes. And I wanted to ask you the question, why did the dog help another dog, but the humans didn't help the most innocent human, an innocent toddler that got hit by a car? Why did this happen? Help me out. Can I hear from people in the audience?
Anybody wants to respond?
Why? Why did
The dog was empathetic. It felt compassion for the other dog. The humans did not feel
That's right.
that for another human.
And what do you think was going on in the mind of those humans? Why did they behave that way? Can anyone excuse what they did or try to put it into context?
I think they probably made some assumptions that other people would help, or that, yeah.
Yeah, they made some assumptions. Any other ideas?
I'm pretty sure it's called bystander syndrome. The more people that are around, the less likely a person is to act.
That's
They
true.
assume that
That's
someone
very
else
true.
will act.
Yeah. In this case, each of those 18 people that were one-on-one with that child right in front of them in the street. So I think the bystander effect is a great explanation that explains a lot. But in this case, there's something else going on as well. Any other ideas?
Yes.
They were too busy going about what they were going to do that they didn't have time to stop.
That's true. Crazy, isn't it? I gotta get to my appointment. I don't have time to stop and help this innocent child in the street. I might be inconvenienced by helping. I might pay a price, however small, for helping another human. And why do you think the dog didn't go through that calculus? Why did the dog? I mean, the dog had to run further to help. The dog had to run into traffic. Why do you think the dog did the right thing?
Perhaps instinct?
Instinct. Thank you. Awesome. You know, I submit to you that it's in our nature to do the right thing. It's in our nature to be heroic. But we can be taught to do just about anything, to do unethical things, to even ignore a toddler in the street. And we have to be very, very careful about what we learn as human beings, because when we start thinking, it gets really dangerous. The dog did not think. The dog just followed his heart and acted. And I'm going to be revisiting this theme as we go through the events of the DC and Flint lead crisis. And I just want you to reflect on all the ways that we're taught, and agencies are taught, to be willfully blind cowards, where literally you could ignore a child left in harm's way in the street. So to tell this story, I want to just mention, the DC lead and water crisis is written up in Wikipedia and has been identified by the U.S. Congress as one of the world's public health tragedies. This was a time period in Washington, D.C. when about 2,000 kids were not born because of exposure to lead in drinking water. It's about 200 extra fetal deaths associated with this time period, and hundreds of young children age 1 through 6 are lead poisoned. And this event is unique because it's misconduct by the very people paid to protect us. Government scientists and engineers, civil servants, who did all this with no profit motive whatsoever. None. And there's no disputing the harm that lead does to children, unlike other contaminants in the environment. It's official U.S. government policy that there is no safe level of lead exposure. So all of our laws are designed to prevent lead exposure from occurring. So for this reason, it makes it a very interesting case study. And what happened in Washington, D.C. is illustrated on this graph and timeline I'm going to develop. This on the y-axis is the 90th percentile lead reported by the water company to EPA as a function of time. And the yellow line is the EPA action level at 15 parts per billion. You can see the data before the year 2000 was below the yellow line. EPA, the water company was complying with the EPA regulations. And what happened is the EPA tried to do something good. They tried to switch from chlorine to chloramine to keep killing bacteria in the water, but to make the water less likely to form cancer. That was the idea at the time. And this well-intentioned switch, right after that was made, the water company was sampling in homes, and they found 5 samples with very high lead. Had those samples been reported, people would have been told, according to the law, that their water was not safe. And moms could have protected their children. They could have used bottled water, used as filters. But the water company did something illegal. They hid the results. And when later asked about it, the manager of the water company said the crisis was averted because they got under the action level. And what do you think the crisis was to the water company? What crisis? Anyone?
Well, possibly cost or being investigated as to why that level was at that level.
Well, that's fascinating because, you might think that if it was a private company, that would be a concern. But we have a system set up that is designed so that no one gets a penny more in profit if they hide lead in water. All we ask these people to do is tell us if lead in water is high so we can protect themselves. They are the environmental policemen. And I think the crisis this person was talking about was the fact that people would have been worried about lead in water, which is the whole point of the law. We don't want them drinking that lead in water. We want them to tell us. And rather than do their job, they were frankly lazy and sloppy. It's incredible how hard they worked to not do their job. So the crisis to them was doing their job. What was happening? These are pictures of lead pipe in Washington, D.C. They're cut in half. You see that orange stuff inside? That's lead rust. And what we didn't know at the time is that if you have chlorine and chloramine in water, you get different outcomes for that rust. On the left, you see the chlorine, the water is orange color. And what that means is the rust is a solid. You can see it. It's not dissolved in water like sugar or salt. And on the right, when you switch to chloramine, you can see the water's clear. That's actually bad. The rust dissolves in the water. And so what was happening when you switch from chlorine to chloramine, and this is all the chemistry we're going to have. I'm sorry to disappoint your professor. We were going from a good situation with chlorine where the lead would stay on the pipe to a bad situation to chloramine where it would start to fall off and dissolve and contaminate the water. No one knew this at the time, but that's what happened. At this time, a great employee at the water company knew about the fact they illegally invalidated samples, and he was fired for telling people the water was unsafe. And after he was fired, he went to DC Office of Inspector General and reported what the water company was doing. OIG and DC and EPA investigated, and in the midst of the worst water-led contamination event in modern U.S. history, they said that the utility was doing nothing wrong. It's just incredible. Guy got fired, did the right thing, told the policeman. They said there was nothing to what he said. Parents finally figured out kids were getting lead poison from drinking the water, and they were even bragging about how good their water was to people. And when the parents called and said, is there a problem with lead in water, WASA would say, our water testing has supported our position that lead levels are safe, are below the action level. So 2 weeks after this sort of thing was happening, another employee stepped forward, and she knew they'd been cheating on the lead and copper roll, and her managers were pressing her to figure out a way to hide the lead problem, but she went directly to the EPA. She emailed them and said the water company was over the action level. It's now known, and they've admitted this, that they immediately started taking proceedings to fire her for doing her job. She got fired. 2 people got fired for trying to tell the public about high lead in water. And ultimately, in this case, 5 people who did their job and tried to alert the public to problems got fired. They did the right thing. They paid a price. In the meantime, the water company and the EPA were hiding information about the high lead in water from the public. They were send out public education to people. It's supposed to alert them to how dangerous the water is. And instead, the headlines would say, DC water is safe. And an attorney there actually said that one can only hope that all our presentations focusing on technical issues make sure that no one knows about the public health concerns. I was hired by the EPA to fix their lead problem about this time, and it's a long story, but suddenly I was asking questions, and I was no longer working with the EPA on this. And anyway, the EPA knew about this problem for years. I later found a Freedom of Information Act request where a subcontractor in 2003 wrote and said, gee, wouldn't it be unethical if we knew about this high lead in water and we weren't telling people about it? But the net result is people in DC were exposed for 3.5 years to the best known neurotoxin at very, very high lead levels, and they couldn't take steps to protect themselves and their kids. It's incredible. We have a whole system designed to make sure this never happened, and it did, because these environmental policemen at EPA and the water company failed us. So this got in the Washington Post. It came out, and people went crazy. They were crazy mad because they'd realized for 3 years they'd been drinking this contaminated water. And it was front page news, and lead was high in the U.S. Congress. The President of the United States was asked if he was drinking lead in his water at 2 press conferences, okay?
Anything like this happen?
And I was involved in the first hearing on this, and I'll just show you how awkward this was for EPA.
Anything like this happen anyplace else in the country to this degree? I mean, is there any precedent for this?
There is a precedent, not to this degree, though, Congressman. I mean, there are instances.
So this is the worst case that's ever happened in the country in terms of the level and length of exposure to lead through the drinking water. Is that a fair statement?
Oh, yeah, that's a good point. Staff is informing me that at Superfund sites, I mean, there are lead contamination problems.
Well, hazardous material sites. Well,
right,
yeah.
Right. But in terms of a, yeah. Well, no. From the perspective.
See, you can kind of see how awkward that was.
Yeah.
And after the meeting, like this congressman noted, he'd never seen anything like it, that the agencies were like deer caught in the headlights, and that this was really, really worse than he thought it was. And what I realized was this was EPA's lead. Our policeman was the criminal. Their regulation had inadvertently caused the problem. And also in DC, it's not a state. EPA has 100% responsibility for anything goes wrong with the water. So this explains their behavior in trying to cover this problem up. Anyway, at this point, people were out of their minds. Like, Congress was mad. There were 6 congressional investigations, and this is how bad it was. When the Government Accountability Office said they were going to look at this, the city said, take a number. It's like a Soho bakery around here. People are tripping over themselves. So note the date on this. This is March 31st, and all of this pressure is coming down to see what was going on. People knew about the whistleblowers who got fired for doing the right thing. We have a chance to learn from our mistakes so that this will never happen again, right? I mean, a horrible exposure of this entire city to the best known neurotoxin. We have to learn from this so it never happens again. Wrong. Because something was about to happen to derail any opportunity to learn from our mistakes. And what I've learned over the last 15 years is that if it ever comes down to the reputation of a government agency and the truth, something has to give, and it's always the truth. Always. And in DC, the truth never had a chance. And I just want to illustrate sort of what happened here in DC at this point in time. The U.S. Centers for Disease Control came in just about 2 days after that Soho bakery. All these people investigated and wrote a falsified scientific report that claimed literally that there's no evidence that anyone in DC had blood lead raised above the CDC levels of concern as a result of lead in water. In other words, incredibly, no one was hurt. Not one man, woman, or child. Now, we now know that the CDC report was falsified. It was just made up out of thin air. And it got all of these agencies a get-out-of-jail-free card. And I want to show you how the scientific report changed the trajectory of learning from our mistakes and holding people accountable to turn it into something that's even worse. On the day that report, the author, Mary Jean Brown, was asked by a colleague, Henry Falk, how's it going? How's your report going? She wrote back, today's the first day in over a month there wasn't a story on lead and water in the Washington Post, and the first I haven't been interviewed by at least one news outlet. I guess that means it worked. How did it work? Pulled the wool over people's eyes and shut them up. So at that point, things started happening, such as EPA. They used to have this clear language: lead in drinking water at levels above 40 ppb is an imminent and substantial danger to women and children. This was just deleted from EPA's website. It never existed. And throughout the EPA web pages, any reference to a given amount of lead in water hurting people was just erased, like it had never existed. And then it really gets bizarre. Suddenly, it's not the people who are drinking the water that are victims. It's the agencies. The people that poisoned Washington, D.C. start to blame the public. So watch this. The first thing in the Washington Times, after the CDC report came out, what we've had in D.C. is really hysteria. Lead in D.C.'s water is much ado about nothing. EPA, no harm, no foul. A pediatrician wrote in and said drinking water is at most a minor source of lead for children. In other words, what we learned from DC is you could drink any amount of lead in water, it won't hurt you. Contrary to 2,000 years of human history, by the way. Erased by CDC's falsified report. And there was even someone who testified to the Senate that, EPA and the water company did the right thing by hiding the lead from people, because you can see how panicked they get over nothing. All right, that's bizarre enough, right? Gets worse. Like a year goes by and these agencies, the people who poison DC, they start to give themselves awards. You cannot make this shit up, people. So Region 3, EPA, the people on the DC lead response team got the gold medal, highest honor award granted by the agency for distinguished service of major significance to environmental improvement and public service. So the criminals got the gold medal from EPA. And then, if that's not bad enough, and this is the danger of misconduct in science and engineering, the lies start to spread and hurt people elsewhere. I mean, this lie that you could drink any amount of lead in water won't hurt you started to be cited all around the country, all around the world. Here's just 3 quick examples. First, Seattle schools. They found high lead in kindergarten classrooms, and pediatricians wrote in and said, we shouldn't be worried about this because no one got hurt in Washington, D.C., no matter how much lead they drank in their water. Here's an example from Montreal. Hey, wow, we've got lead pipe in Montreal. No worries. The best studies in D.C., CDC found that even though they drank lead in water up to 300 parts per billion, it had no influence. It didn't go into your blood. No problem. And at the time, there were investigative reporters looking into what was going on around the United States, and they found that utilities were cheating on the lead and copper rule. And nothing was done about it because lead and water doesn't hurt anybody. Keep cheating. Everyone cheat. Why do we have this rule? I don't know. Lead and water doesn't hurt anybody. I watched utilities talk about cheating right in front of the US EPA. They did nothing. Nothing about it at all. And, in the aftermath of Washington, D.C., we proved water utilities were falsifying records, illegally invalidated samples, sampling in ways that misled. They were playing every game in the book. We'd bring it to EPA. They would do nothing. They would do nothing to enforce the federal law, nothing at all. So this was really disconcerting. The takeaway message from this horrible example, what did we learn? It's claimed that what we learned was you could drink any amount of lead and water, it won't hurt you. That's the power of these government science agencies when they engage in misconduct. It's unbelievable. They could care less about the truth if their reputation's at stake. They'll just rewrite history if it comes down to it. So this was very, very stressful for me. I was involved in this all along, and there's this famous movie called It's a Wonderful Life. It plays about Christmas time. I'll just kind of quickly go through the highlights of the story. It's like this dude, Jimmy Stewart played, and he got in trouble, and he was thinking about killing himself, and there was an angel that came and told him and showed him how much better the world would have been if he didn't do the right thing, and everyone lives happily ever after. That's how the movie's supposed to turn out, right? And for me, we exposed this problem, and if you look at the scorecard, I got in trouble for doing this, but what I saw is these agencies gutted the health basis for the LCR. Suddenly people were saying lead and water won't hurt anybody. Every single warning about the dangers of lead and water was removed from government web pages. And it created this perception that was hurting kids all around the country and all around the world. That you'd find high lead in kindergarten classrooms, and doctors would say, no problem, drink all that lead. So, yeah, this was sad to think you did the right thing, and the world would have been a better place if you hadn't lived. That's the reality of whistleblowing sometimes. You put your career on the line, like those whistleblowers I mentioned. 5 of them did the right thing. They got fired. No one thanked them. No one. And the people who perpetrated this crime, they all kept their jobs. No one was held accountable. So I tried to reach out to these people. Like, I figure I'm a scientist, they're a scientist. Let's get this thing figured. I reached out to the CDC. I asked them about data. I tried to tell them what was going on. I submitted FOIAs. They blew me off. I had reporters intervene. And here's what CDC told reporters about me. No one has a problem with our paper except an engineer with no formal training in or appreciation of public health. We're not changing our report. Wow, I was really, really mad about that. So anyway, you don't want to get me mad, by the way. And then they started issuing press releases against me. This is CDC's Office of So-Called Science Integrity, claiming that my claims about their bad paper were exaggerated and that they investigated my claim and there was no problem with this paper at all. So anyway, so what I did is I didn't give up. We kept fighting, and I went to Children's National Medical Center, and they had blood lead data of their own, and it took me 2 years to harass them to the point they would give me the data because I wouldn't give up, and it was easier to finally give me the data and make me go away than to keep arguing with me. So anyway, I wrote this cool paper that showed kids got hammered in Washington, D.C., just like we knew from 2,000 years of history. You drink lead in water, you get lead poisoned. And this was written up in the front page of the Washington Post. And this, notice the date here, 2009. This is 5 years after it was front page news. And at this point in time, who's going to go back in history and hold people accountable? Lying is just so effective, you know. 5 years before anyone knew that kids in DC were hurt. There was a great congressional hearing that I was involved in 2010 where the CDC got reamed by Congress and talked about how their report was completely scientifically indefensible and how they falsified the conclusion to get the other agencies off. And, you know, it was CDC got hammered pretty good at that time, but frankly, they didn't care because we never thought people would do this at these agencies. We thought scientists and engineers with no profit motive would never engage in misconduct like these people did. So we are powerless to hold these people accountable. They can get reamed by Congress, but there's no way to get these people fired. I also wrote a paper that showed kids in DC actually were not born, because that's one of the things that lead is. It induces abortions. And so by drinking this lead-contaminated water, there were a lot of miscarriages and fetal death as a result. So, you know, this was the DC part of the journey for me. My students who'd worked on this got a lot of good publicity, and I got Best Science Award, a MacArthur Fellowship, and doesn't get any better than that. They like give you a check for $500,000 and leave. And but you know, I mean, this incident really made me reflect on how we train people to be willfully blind cowards. We train people to do this. We do it every day in this country. And the best example is what happened to these 5 people who did the right thing, got fired, and all the pathological lying scumbags at EPA and CDC who betrayed scientific principles to hide what they did and kept their job. Not one of these people has been held accountable to this day. Not one. So what kind of message does this send? What are we teaching people at these agencies? And when something goes wrong at these agencies, do not be surprised when no one is there to look out for your interests. Okay? Do not be surprised. So there's no accountability. A class action was initiated in 2009, but you can't prove who was hurt 5 years after the fact. It's kind of hard. It was thrown out maybe in summer 2016. There's 5 kids still fighting in the lawsuit against the government to get some compensation for the damage that was done to them. This incident's about 20 to 30 times worse, by the way, than the lead poisoning in Flint. Not to downplay what happened in Flint. And not one government official was ever fired or demoted for what happened in DC. Which brings us to Flint, 2014, 2015. In some ways, Flint became a way for me to apply what I learned in DC and refight that battle with a different outcome. Because I've been living this nightmare for 12 years where these agencies got away literally with murder. And so when I heard about this Flint issue, and I'm going to call it a miracle for reasons I hope, become apparent to you. And, I just want you to think about this great quote by Albert Einstein, where he said, the world is not going to be destroyed by those who do evil, but by those who watch them without doing anything. And what this says is we cannot be bystanders. We cannot walk by that little child in the street, because we're going to create a world that you're not going to want to live in. So I think you all know the story. Flint was a little bit ahead of the curve in terms of going bankrupt, and they're trying to save some money, and they switched to the Flint River water. And here's a famous picture saying, here's to Flint. This is a historic step for us, the mayor said. And it was about to be true. It was about to be historic, not for the reasons they thought, though. And this is when, because someone forgot to do their job, kids in Flint were put in harm's way. They forgot to put corrosion control in the water that would keep the lead on the pipe and out of their water. So what you have is, if you don't have corrosion control, which is the responsibility of civil servants at the Michigan Department of Environmental Quality, and you have a corrosive water, what you get is a perfect storm of corrosion. Lead just starts falling off the water, from the pipe into the water. There were so many warning signs here, it's just unbelievable. I mean, people started complaining right away. General Motors couldn't use this water because it was eating up their engine plant parts. So, and actually, the state knew about this and just looked the other way. This is what water looked like from some of the consumers' houses. Why does it look that way? Because the water was eating up the iron pipes in addition to the lead pipes. So that's rusty water. That's iron in the water from corrosion. No one paid attention. This picture is of Leanne Walters, my friend who's a mom in Flint, Michigan, has kind of become a national hero with good reason. And she had two twins, and one of them had elevated blood lead. And we measured the lead in her house, and the allowable limit of lead in water is about 15 parts per billion. And we measured 13,500 parts per billion in her house. That's 2.5 times hazardous waste levels of lead in drinking water. The average at her house was 800 times more than what's allowed by the EPA. So once again, we had good people. Miguel Del Toro, EPA employee, he wrote this memo that noted that there was no corrosion control in the city of Flint. Kids were in harm's way. He put his career on the line to write this memo, to alert people to this problem. And the mayor of Flint, when he heard about this memo, he actually reached out to the top environmental policeman in the region, Susan Hedman. And he asked Susan Hedman, is there anything to this memo? And he got told by Susan Hedman, there's nothing to worry about. And she's sorry that Mr. Del Toro wrote this memo, telling people that Flint was breaking the law. So a few days after that, Mayor Walling went on TV and showed he was drinking the water to prove it's safe. Just incredible. All this lead in water. An EPA employee put his career on the line to expose it. A Flint mom figured out her kid got lead poison from it. And the EPA and the MDQ are telling everyone that the water is perfectly safe to drink, and fooling people, including Mr. Walling. About that time, people started raising concerns about the safety of the water based on the memo and the data we gave to Miguel. And the state said, anyone concerned about lead in drinking water Flint should just relax. So what do we have here? We got kids in harm's way. One kid was already lead poisoned. People put their professional lives on the line to protect kids. They were not bystanders. And the state and the EPA dragged this kid back into the street. Drag Flint's kids back into harm's way to stop people from protecting them. And on August 4th of 2015, Miss Walters and other residents were like asking, what's going on with the lead in water in Flint? And the state civil servants bragged to them that Mr. Del Toro had been handled. He wouldn't be working on this problem anymore. And we now know that the state MDQ was cheating on the lead and copper rule monitoring to cover up the lead problem in Flint's water. So at that point, we were pretty mad. And as we said, we went all in for Flint. We formed a team. There were a lot of undergrads, grad students, postdocs, and we launched this campaign to help Flint residents understand what was going on in their water. And, you know, what corrosive water does, it eats up pipes. It destroys pipe infrastructure. This is just a picture of a cutaway section. We did some experiments that showed how Flint residents weren't crazy. When you put steel in Flint water, the water turned all rusty. When you did the same experiment in Detroit water on the bottom there, it wasn't so rusty. So this water was corrosive. We did the same thing with lead samples, copper lead solder, where on the left, you see what happens to the copper solder in Flint water. You see that white stuff in the water? That's lead. Lead's just being eaten up off the pipe, being put in the water. When they were in Detroit water on the right, the water was clear. It had very, very low lead. And we even, you know, this is not hard stuff. I even work with fourth graders to show that fourth graders could figure this out. So these citizens, they did an amazing job. We provided the sample kits, the funding, the technical expertise, the analytical support. They did all the hard work getting the samples. They worked really, really hard. We found out the water was not safe, and the state was fighting us every step of the way. This guy, when we issued a warning, he told reporters that, you know, we're a magic act, basically. We pull that rabbit out of the hat wherever we go, finding high lead in water. Our offering broad, dire public health advice based on quick testing is fanning political flames irresponsibly. Residents of Flint concerned about the health of their community don't need that, meaning us. We were troublemakers. And he did correctly say the state and EPA are working together in Flint, have been from the start. That's correct. They were working hand in hand, except for Mr. Del Toro, to cover this problem up so no one could protect Flint's kids. So again, here we were helping Flint residents, proving their water was not safe, and here's the state and the EPA dragging Flint's kids back into harm's way. Incredible. The policemen we pay to protect kids were essentially working overtime to poison them. Same thing happened to Dr. Mona when she found out that the high lead in water we found was causing higher incidence of lead poisoning. The state said that this is a near hysteria here, and they didn't call her irresponsible. He called her actions unfortunate of the doctors. Flint's water is safe. So here you have a pediatrician dragging kids out of harm's way. But finally, you know what happened here? It's actually interesting. What do these agencies, what do they understand? And over the years, what I've learned that they understand, really, unfortunately, is they don't understand science. They don't understand truth. But what they care about is ridicule. So I'm going to play you a clip from Comedy Central here so you can see it.
The saddest thing about this leak is how little it would have cost to prevent it all.
The fix was about $100 a day. All of this could have been avoided for just that small amount of money.
$100 a day. Why didn't you say something? I want to call out to all my people in Africa right now watching The Daily Show. Because my friends, for only $100 a day, we can save a village in America and get these people drinking the water that they so badly need for just the price of 5 cups of coffee in New York.
Okay, so you can get an idea of sort of how embarrassing that is, and frankly, that's what these agencies understand is, if they're not scientists, if they're unscientific, the only thing they understand is ridicule, and that's your last weapon. And I had to use it. I didn't like using it, but ultimately, we got the job done. It took a long, long time, but a federal emergency was declared as a result of what happened, this man-made disaster in Flint. And even President Obama weighed in and said, if I lived in Flint, I'd be beside myself if my kids' health were at risk. And, it's just an amazing story. I call it a miracle because all of these amazing outside people had to get involved to protect kids. And without every one of these actors not being a bystander, kids in Flint would still be drinking that water to this day. To this day. And so it really is kind of an amazing story, and it's what you're talking about here is reaching a critical mass of moral courage, or a tipping point where you're fighting the powers that be, like the EPA and the state, the environmental policemen who are the criminals. And eventually you reach this point where everyone knows that they're corrupt. And once you get beyond that point, that 10% level, the house of cards can fall down. So, this is what was necessary to get kids protected in Flint. Or in other words, to refight the DC battle and win to some extent, meaning kids got protected, kids got out of harm's way. So just to close, it's sad, but doing the right thing is not always rewarded, and you're often punished for doing it. And that's why it's unusual. That's why it's heroic. I mean, people don't want to do it. It's painful. But without a critical mass of heroic actors, and that includes scientists and engineers, and we're trained cowards. History has shown that evil will be victorious, and that's the story of DC and Flint. And then the other thing I want to leave you with is that, what's the punishment for unethical behavior? Who pays? Usually it's the most vulnerable and poorest amongst us. And our actions collectively create the world we live in. And the punishment I feel for our moral cowardice is that you have to live in the world we help create. If you look at what Flint residents' world was like till the time we got involved, it was unbelievable. It was like half 1984, half enemy of the people. It is not a world I want to live in, and I will not live in that kind of world. So whatever it takes had to be stopped. So, in closing, I think in Flint 2015, I'm just so proud that humankind lived up to our heroic nature. We got kids out of harm's way. And this is a battle that you guys are going to have to carry forward, in your careers. And I just hope you live up to your heroic nature as well. So with that, I'll just close and thank this NSF grant I work on, bridging the gap between engineers and society, learning to listen. And if you have any questions, feel free to ask.
Okay, so I'll take questions on this side. Remember to say your name before. Dr. Randall's going to do that side.
Hi, my name is TK.
Hi, TK.
I want to ask a question in regard to a DC. I think one of the early slides you had a graph that showed the percentile lead in the water.
Right.
And as I have observed from 2001 and 2002, it decreased dramatically. But from 2002 to 2003, it increased back. Why do you think it decreased? And also, why do you think it increased back?
Well, The data is no better than the way you collect it. And the water company was learning tricks to not find the lead. There's all kinds of ways to sample lead in water and miss it. And unfortunately, that's what happened in Flint. I mean, one of the most outrageous things about the Flint story is even as National Guards people walk the streets and hand out bottled water to make sure everyone's got a lead filter, Flint has never failed the lead and copper rule. That's what a joke EPA has allowed this rule to become. How'd they do that? They played tricks in how they sampled so that when they collected the sample for EPA, it was low, even when it was high when people were drinking the water. It's cheating. So the numbers you see there are just the result of how they were taking samples. Unfortunately, from the time they switched to chloramine until about 2006, the lead was just really outrageously high. Kids drinking the water just getting hammered by lead.
Hi, my name is Kadra. I was just wondering, how can we as civilians now protect ourselves, knowing that the EPA has the potential to lie about these things? Like, how can we protect ourselves? Or, yeah.
That's a great question. That is my number one concern. That's why I continue fighting this battle, even though, I'm paying a big personal price. Obviously, they don't look favorably on you when you say bad things about them. And I'm never probably going to get a lot of funding from these agencies. But the truth is, none of us are safe as long as these agencies behave the way they do. So we have to become politically involved. And this is not Democrat, Republican issue. This is bipartisan. And if we do not get this fixed, how can we have policemen, environmental policemen, that behave this way? They're poisonous. We can't. And I love the EPA. I love the CDC. I mean, we have to have a trustworthy CDC and EPA, but as long as these people are in charge and this perversion of natural selection where it's run by weak, unethical cowards, none of us are safe. So we need to change their culture so that good people are not fired for doing the right thing. We need to fire bad actors. And we need to have some kind of external check on their power because, as I said, one of the reasons they get away with it is no one ever thought they would behave this way. And we, as Democrats, as Republicans, we all have a stake in this. We all deserve better government. And if we do not get this fixed, our kids will pay a price until we do.
Hi, my name's Alistair. I was specifically asking about the people who got fired after they reported these things.
Yeah.
Are they blacklisted from ever working back at the same company? Do they have a job now? Can they ever work in the same field?
Let's see. Of the 5, none of them are working in the field any longer. One of them died of cancer, tragically, my good friend Ralph Scott. But none of them are working in that field. And why is that? It's because we, as a society, value loyalty to your friends and to your employer more than we value loyalty to the human race. If you betray your friends, as I've done, not easy. I wouldn't recommend it to anyone, but I had to do it. No one wants to be your friend. If you betray your agency, you will never work at that agency again. It says something sad about us, I think, as a species. It's unique. There's heroism throughout the animal kingdom. No other species punishes heroic actors like humans do for having misplaced loyalties. Misplaced meaning you care more about the human race and innocent children than you care about your friends or your employer. Two of those whistleblowers won lawsuits. One of them won about $500,000. One of them won more. The others didn't. The others got nothing. But even $500,000 for having your career destroyed, it's not much. You can't work again in that field. And the stress is unbelievable. I mean, we never reward these people. It's like when soldiers go to war and they have to shoot people for a cause they believe in. When they come back, we help them deal with the stress by trying to say, you did the right thing. We give them honors. We try to help them deal with their PTSD. Whistleblowers never get that kind of help. It's crazy how we treat these heroes. So it's sad.
Hi, my name's Joanna. I'm wondering about one of the pictures that you showed closer to the beginning, had 2 bottles of water and one had chlorine. I don't remember what was in the other solution.
Chloramine.
Chloramine, yeah. And you were able to see the color disfiguration because of lead in one. Is there a reason that they switched over from using those different solutions?
Yeah, the idea was that, and this was well-intentioned, there was good science behind it. Chlorine has been one of the greatest achievements, engineering achievements in the last 100 years. It kills bacteria before they kill us. Unfortunately, it has small amounts of what's called disinfection byproducts, meaning when we put chlorine in the water, it creates small amounts of carcinogens. So at some small level, people are getting cancer. That risk is worth it because if we didn't do it, people die from bacteria. The idea of using chloramine instead was you would still kill the bacteria, but you get fewer cancers. That was the hope. Didn't really pan out that way. It looks like chloramine is actually worse than chlorine, some of the more recent data. But it was well-intentioned. It was good science. And no one knew that when you switch from chlorine to chloramine, the lead would start falling off into the water.
The reason I'm asking this question is because with all the publicity about the Flint situation, I called our water department. I live in St. Joseph, Michigan, and I happen to live on a street where about 7 years ago, they tore up the street and replaced all the storm sewers and improved all the pipes and the water supply. And I know from looking at the pipes that came out that there were lead pipes in my street. And I know that, and I've seen this on other streets, and I know that we have lead pipes in our city. So I called and asked about it. And I called the supervisor at the water department. And I told him, and he said, they are aware we have lead pipes in our city, but because we have Lake Michigan water, it's a good water source. And that has prevented our water from having lead in it. But then he said, your service pipe could be a lead pipe. And I said, well, we did have that replaced when they tore up our street, but many people have not.
Yeah.
And he is aware that newer subdivisions, like in the 1980s and the late 80s, they were still putting lead pipe in to carry water. And so he advised me to get my water checked, and he said, but do not have it checked locally. You have to send it out because it won't be accurate. So I need to send it to South Bend or Lansing. He said it would cost $25. But in listening to your presentation, maybe I better do that. I kind of wasn't going to, but maybe I should because we could still have lead in our water.
This is what you're seeing all around the country right now is Fear. People in Flint are never going to trust the state and federal government again, and who can blame them?
That's right.
And other people in the U.S. are starting to look around and going, if we can't trust these agencies on something as black and white as lead and water, what can we trust them on, you know? So it's horrible because we have to trust people. You cannot live in a world without trust. You cannot live in a world where you trust the word of other scientists and engineers. We can't live in a world where we distrust our environmental policemen. And so, yeah, I mean, your smaller issues, right? Like, is your water safe? And everyone in the U.S. is right now going, I don't know. I can't trust these people. And you can't trust them when they're, our veterans need help. You look at the scandal at the Veterans Administration. You can't trust the CDC. This is why it's striking such a chord. We are not getting the government we deserve. We're not getting the government we pay for. We have to get these agencies fixed. We cannot live in a world without trust. They have to be trustworthy people. And if you can't trust them, like I said, on lead and water, what else are they screwing up?
Hi, my name's Adriana, and I was wondering if the EPA and other agencies will ever be held accountable for their actions in these water crises. If that'll
I'm eternally optimistic. So I'm the most optimistic person in the world. You have to be to keep fighting, right? And part of the reason is I cannot live in a world where this kind of injustice is allowed to occur right before my eyes, where science is used to poison kids. It's not. The emperor has no clothes, okay? The emperor is poisoning kids. So we have to get this fixed, whether this is it or whether we need like more kids in more cities to get poisoned before we do something. I really don't know. Maybe we're on a path to a new dark ages where science can't be trusted anymore, in which case it's going to be a horrible, horrible world to live in. I really hope we learn from this mistake and we get the culture of these agencies changed. We have to. So I'm going to do everything in my power to do that, but it's up to us. It's up to all of us. Are we going to tolerate this? Is this the world we're going to live in? What are our priorities in this world? So it's on each and every one of us. Whenever something like Flint happens, who's responsible? We always go through this thing. Who's responsible? Well, let's vote Mayor Walling out of office. Let's blame it on Governor Snyder, even though these were civil servants who screwed this up and were bipartisan and who they misled. We're all responsible for what happened to these kids in Flint. Every last one of us. I mean, they wouldn't be allowed to get away with it unless we tolerated it.
Hello, my name's Noah, and I'm just a little confused as to what you were saying about how So you were saying something about how even if there was lead in the water and they found it, doesn't mean they'd lose their jobs. But the fact that they let it go on for so long undetected, and finding out that they actually were just hiding a lot of results, why does the law protect them from that? Why is it something that you're not allowed for? Like, I don't know, I guess, why hasn't someone
gone to jail?
Well, yeah, gone to jail, or at least either replace the organization or the people in charge of the organization that caused that event to happen. Because it's not like those people, it's not as if they're never going to make that mistake again. If anything, because they've made it and haven't
got away with it, they'll do it again.
Yeah.
That's why I knew in D.C., another DC was inevitable. What they learn that they can get away with it. So when this happened in Flint, I was ready to act. Now, how many times can I do this? I spent almost $200,000 of my own money to expose what happened. The miracle in Flint is not that this was, not that it occurred and was stopped, but we even knew about it. This sort of thing happens all the time, and people don't know about it. Why can't we hold these people accountable? Well, there is such protections against federal employees getting fired and state employees getting fired. It's absurd. If you did this sort of thing in private industry, you'd be in jail. Here, it's like, oh, it's a big deal. Someone loses their job. What do you have to do to go to jail as a scientist or engineer at a federal or state agency? How many kids do you have to poison? How hard do you have to work to not do your job before you would actually go to jail? There's just too many protections that these employees have. If you were a landlord and did this, you would be in jail in a second. It happens every day. A landlord doesn't tell a tenant about a lead paint hazard, you go to jail. Landlords in this country take lead risk to their tenants much more seriously than the CDC or EPA do for whole cities of kids exposed to lead and water from pipes. The CDC and the EPA have poisoned more kids in this country in the last 10 years from their policies on lead and water, covering up lead and water problems, than all the illegal actions of landlords in this country combined. I'm convinced of that. They don't care. Yeah.
Hi, I'm Dave Novak. Did you have a response at all to the Colorado gold mine toxic spill? Are you actively participating in that? Are you surprised the fact that literally no one has been held accountable for that?
Well, not so much on that. I mean, argue with me about it, but I look at that and they screwed it up, and of course they couldn't hide it. I mean, you could not hide the disaster. They tried, but good luck. It's something you could see. And then in the end, it's kind of like it's an accident, and humans screw up. I mean, I'm the last one to blame people for screwing up. I screw up all the time, but I fess up to my mistakes, and I wouldn't allow them to poison kids when I know about it. And I think lead and water is kind of unique because there are laws that are supposed to stop something like Flint from ever happening. And those laws were broken. It's indisputable. They did not follow the law. EPA has not enforced this law. We don't need a new law. I just need people to enforce the existing law. So I guess the screw up in Colorado, as bad as it is, and it's epically bad, I don't put it in the same boat as refusing to do your job and follow the law and allowing kids to get hurt while you know otherwise. I mean, you've ignored every warning sign. You've tried to cover it up 8 different ways. And I guess maybe I'm too forgiving, but like I said, I screw up all the time. And I mean, but I try to fess up and learn from my mistakes, That's the best we can do as humans. You can't stop screw ups.
Hi, my name is Allie. I was wondering, so I was reading about the Flint water crisis, and I discovered that I live in one of the states that doesn't actually report lead levels to the CDC, regardless of whether the CDC can be trusted or not. So,
right.
What independent companies would you suggest that we send our water to get reliable results?
Oh, you mean lead in water or lead in blood?
Either.
Okay. Well, you're too old to worry about doing blood lead testing. What you should be worried about is trying to reduce your exposure. If you live in a city with lead pipe, frankly, if you were my family, I wouldn't trust the water. You're drinking through a lead straw. Chunks of lead can fall off into the water that are chemically identical to lead paint chips. So For me, the simple answer is an economic decision. I can buy a lead filter from NSF certified, $20 from Lowe's or Home Depot, screw that onto my faucet, and eliminate the lead and water risk. For $20, I can eliminate the lead and water risk. Why would I bother testing the water for $30? And if the lead and water was high, I know I'd have a problem. That's nice. I'm glad to know it. But if my lead and water is low, it actually doesn't tell me anything. The way this problem exists now is that it's really chunks of lead falling off into your water. So if when you sample it on that day, you don't get a chunk of lead, you might go, wow, my water looks great, right? But the next glass of water you have might have enough lead in it to be, if you drank it, it'd be like eating 2 or 3 lead paint drips. This is something people don't want to talk about. But, the simple answer is, if you live in a city with a lead pipe, I would buy a lead filter and I would not trust the water. If I thought my house had a chance there was a lead pipe, I would not trust the water, period. I would not let my family drink water if I had a home with a lead pipe, period.
My name is Don. I'm a retired electrical engineer. I worked in the private industry. My question is, and you already are starting to address it, from a technical standpoint, how do you solve the problem? Do you replace your entire infrastructure, or is there a chemical way of doing it? Because we're hearing stories about what are they going to do with Flint? Is it going to take 2 years, 6 months? What?
No, it's going to take a long time to replace the infrastructure. The first thing they have to do is protect people. And they finally figured out these bad actors were misleading everyone. They were misleading Democrats. They were misleading Republicans. They got people filters and bottled water. And so you can live with lead in your water. That's the crazy thing about this. If you're just told you have a lead and water problem, you can use filters and bottled water. You can bathe in it. It's not going to hurt you, right? So people got protected because they were told there was a problem. They had the filters. They have the bottled water. The next step is to try to reduce the lead by corrosion control. Now, Flint actually has the best corrosion control in the country right now. So EPA's got the best levels of phosphate inhibitor in the water. We're going to sample in Flint starting next week with the residents again. We're going to repeat the August 2015 sampling. This time be funded by EPA. So thank you, EPA. And there's many, many good people at EPA, mind you. They're not represented by these bad people who are at the higher levels of the agency. They want to do their job. But we think we're going to find Flint's water's probably quite low in lead. We're going to find out when we start sampling next week. In the meantime, people need to use the filters. Finally getting all these lead pipes out is going to take years and years and years. As we found in Flint, their records are so bad they don't even know where the lead pipes are. They finally got their lead pipe data entered into a map, for example, and they went and checked out 100 homes they thought had a lead pipe. Only 20 had a lead pipe. That's 80% error rate in their records. If you checked out 100 homes that are thought to have no lead pipe, I'm pretty sure they're going to find lead pipe. So at that point, what good are the records? And that's the problem we have all over the U.S. right now. These utilities did not keep good records. In fact, we made it in their interest to kind of have bad records so that they wouldn't have to be subject to the lead and copper rule. They could claim, oh, I don't know if I have a lead pipe because I just lost all my records. So that really helps me because if I don't know where the lead pipes are, I don't have to do certain things. So it's a mess, but we have the filters. They can be used. We got to get smarter about finding the lead pipes. We have to get smarter about investing in our infrastructure. But at the same time, the reality is we're in an era of declining discretionary money. We have to make decisions about where we spend our money. If we spend our money on lead pipe replacement, that means we have less for roads, less for bridges, less for education, right? These are tough decisions we have to make. So I wish it were easier. I wish we had all the money in the world and solve all these problems, but we can solve the lead problem by using these filters, for example. And In some ways, that makes as much sense as replacing the infrastructure. I would like to see us replace the lead pipes, but I know it's so darn expensive. And it would help if we knew where the lead pipes were, but we don't. We lost the records, you know?
I'm a retired pediatric nurse, and I worked for a number of years in an impoverished community. And we saw often children with lead poisoning.
Oh, yeah.
And some of these children were removed from their families because of lead poisoning. And of course, it was always the paint that was
No,
blamed.
they blame it on the paint every time because there's a lot of money in lead paint.
And I'm wondering, I mean, some of these children could have been poisoned by their water.
I guarantee you they were.
And unjustly removed from their homes.
I know it. It's an outrage. It's an absolute outrage.
This is beyond comprehension.
It is. You know, the CDC is so unethical, so lacking in integrity. I cannot tell you how angry these people made me. If you want to see an example, I talked a little bit about a child in DC. If you look up my MSU talk, how Jonathan Turner saved Flint, Michigan, I talk about this case where they blamed the lead paint and lied about the lead and water risk and the fact this child had a lead pipe. And it's what I said earlier. If it comes down to their reputation and the truth is going to lose every time, even if it means threatening a parent that they might take their child away from them. That's what happened in DC to one of the kids' cases I investigated. And it's an outrage what the power we give these agencies, and if the fact they abuse this power in this way and abuse the public trust, they should pay a horrible price for that. And the fact that they're not even held accountable, it's just beyond words in terms of my anger about this.
Okay, Professor Edwards, thank you very, very much.
Thank you.
This was a great close to our guest lecture series this year. Frightening, yes, but
thank you for having me. Thank you. You're a great audience. Take care.